Magnolias on East Bay Street glowed amber that Friday evening. 7:14. Table 12 sat by the tall window facing the Battery, and the candle between them had already burned unevenly on one side. Delaney whispered the sentence into the third silence of the meal. "You probably regret coming." Her voice held no reproach, only tiredness. Everett did not set his glass down. He looked at her for a long moment. Then quietly, "I came because my wife made me promise. Tonight was the first night I could keep it." Outside, a fishing boat turned toward shore. Rope struck wood. The dinner did not go the way she had planned. Delaney had told herself 45 minutes, no more. She had drafted the rescue text to her sister Cora at 6:58, a single sentence about a work emergency that could be pulled up at any moment. She deleted the draft at 7:19. Everett introduced himself the way a man does when he has practiced the short version. A boat repair shop out on Shem Creek, family-owned since his great-grandfather. A daughter, 9, named Wren, a wife who had died 3 years ago. Cancer. He said the last part without lowering his voice or looking away. He did not add anything about school or work before that. He offered no resume. She gave him her title because it was easier than not giving it. United States Attorney for the District of South Carolina. He nodded as if he had already known, which she noticed, because most people either pretended not to know or asked a follow-up question they thought was clever. He did neither. They ate slowly. He mentioned a line from Marilyn Robinson without naming her, the way people do when a book has lived inside them for years. She answered with something Ishiguro had written, about the way small kindnesses accumulate. Neither of them was trying to impress the other. She caught herself relaxing and did not correct the reflex. The check came. He paid before she could reach for her card. The tip he left was in cash, in small bills, the money of a man who counted every dollar, or the money of a man who did not want a paper trail. She could not tell which yet. Outside, under the streetlight on Broad, the harbor wind carried the smell of salt and diesel. He did not ask for her number. He said only, "If this is the last time, thank you for letting me keep my promise." Then he walked toward the parking lot without turning back. She stood on the sidewalk for 2 full minutes. She pulled out her phone and texted Cora. "Who set this up?" Cora answered a moment later. "Friend of Mom's. From before." "Why?" Delaney did not reply. The drive back to her apartment on Meeting Street was 7 blocks. She parked. She rode the elevator up. She sat down in the armchair by the window without taking off her shoes. The sentence he had said kept returning, arriving from different angles the way a song does when you cannot remember the second verse. She had opened the door for him to complain about being dragged out. She had expected a shrug, a joke, a polite lie. She had not expected honesty that made no attempt to earn her sympathy. She thought about the way his hand had rested on the table between courses. Steady, not the stillness of a man who was calm, the stillness of a man who had already used all the tremor he was going to use for a long time. Sometime after midnight, she got up and made tea she did not drink. In the morning, on the entry table where she had dropped her keys, his business card was still there. She did not remember him handing it to her. Only a name and a shop number, no email, no title, no indication that he had ever been anything other than a man who repaired boats on Shem Creek. She left the card on the table. Monday morning came with rain over the harbor, and the smell of the marsh coming up through the closed windows of the Federal Building on Broad Street. Delaney arrived before 7. On her desk, in the same place it had sat for 4 months, lay the folder marked United States versus Trumbull et al. She did not open it right away. Instead, she buzzed Lena Vasquez, her senior legal assistant, and said, "Run a name for me, nothing formal. Everett Marston, out of Mount Pleasant. BOI records, standard background." She did not give a reason. Lena did not ask. 30 minutes later, Lena set a stack of paper on the desk and stayed standing. "Where do you want me to start?" she said. Delaney looked up. "Anywhere. Yale Law School. Class of 2009. Top 5%. Order of the Coif. Judge Advocate General's Corps, Navy, 2009 through 2020. Made captain at 34. A promotion timeline the review board had flagged as unusually fast. Author of a treatise called Marston on Admiralty, 3 editions, cited in more than 400 federal opinions. Delaney had cited it herself in 3 separate briefs, without ever once looking at the author page. Short list for Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, spring of 2019. Withdrew his name in June the same year. His wife had been diagnosed the week before, nominated for a seat on the United States District Court for the District of South Carolina in 2021. Declined. The seat had gone to someone else who wrote a very ordinary opinion 3 months later. Distinguished Service Medal on his retirement from the Navy. Rear Admiral Bennett Craig had pinned it on him. Delaney recognized the name. Craig had testified once in an unrelated matter 3 years earlier. She had liked him. Lena said, "I checked for photos. There is almost nothing. One shot from a retirement ceremony in 2020. He is not in the front row." Delaney turned the page. She looked at the blurred image. A tall man standing 3 rows back, half in shadow, half turned away from the camera. It could have been anyone. It was him. She sat still for 20 minutes. Lena left the room and closed the door behind her. The man across from her at Magnolia's had cited nothing. He had asked no clever questions. He had not corrected her when she had misused a term of art about grand jury procedure. She remembered it now. A small slip she had made after 2 glasses of wine. He would have known. He had let it pass. That evening, after the office had cleared, she took the long way home. She turned east onto the Ravenel Bridge and came off it into Mount Pleasant and drove down toward the water until she reached the bend where Shem Creek widens. From the opposite bank, she could see the sign Marston and Sons Marine in white paint on a green board and the yellow light in the open door of the workshop. 2 shapes inside, a man and a child. The child was wiping something on the workbench with a careful, unhurried motion. The man was pointing to something farther down the counter and speaking. Delaney could not hear him. She could see the shape of his shoulders when he laughed a small, brief laugh. Over almost before it began. She did not cross the bridge. She did not stop. She drove home. She did not open the business card. The question she went to sleep with was not why he had said nothing. The question was what she was going to do with the fact that he had not. Wednesday she went to Shem Creek herself. The official reason was clean enough to survive an audit. One of the shell companies in the Trumbull grand jury package had listed a warehouse address 3 docks down from Marston and Sons, and a witness she needed to interview claimed to have delivered cargo there. She had grounds to walk the parcel. Standard practice would have been to send an investigator. She went in person. Everett was not surprised to see her. He met her at the workshop door with a rag over one shoulder and a socket wrench in his back pocket, and he did not comment on the fact that a United States attorney had shown up on a Wednesday morning without an appointment. "Come in," he said. Easier to talk inside. The shop smelled of engine oil and cedar and salt. Along one wall, a hand-drawn nautical chart in a wooden frame, yellowed at the edges. Above the workbench, a single small photograph, a woman with brown hair, laughing, one hand resting on a rusted anchor at the head of a beach. In the corner, in ink, Halden, 2018. Delaney looked at the photograph once and looked away. The daughter came in from the back room a moment later. She was carrying a paperback that had lost its cover. 9 years old, tall for her age, hair tied loosely at the neck. She stopped when she saw Delaney and waited. "Delaney Whitcomb," Everett said. "I met her at dinner last week." The girl nodded. "Nice to meet you, ma'am." Then she sat down in the corner chair and opened the book. She did not linger to watch. She did not perform curiosity. She read. Everett walked Delaney through the case questions with the economy of a man who had already thought through everything she was going to ask. The 4 docks she was tracking. Yes, he knew the owners. The shell company at Slip 14 was almost certainly the front for a Georgetown attorney named Preston Lyle. She had not asked about a 5th dock. He mentioned it anyway. "There is a 5th one you do not have on that list," he said. "The registration went through a family attorney out of Georgetown, so it is not sitting where you would think to look." She wrote the name down. He never used the words chain of title or beneficial ownership. He spoke as if he were describing the layout of his own neighborhood, which, in a sense, he was. She watched him while he talked. His shoulders sat level. His voice stayed low. He had chosen not to speak in the language he had spent a decade learning. It was a form of grace. It was also, she understood, a form of trust he was letting her decide whether she wanted the other version of him. When she was done, she thanked him. Wren stood up from the corner chair and walked her to the door. The girl paused on the top step and pointed at an old cast-iron anchor beside the railing. "That belonged to my great-grandfather," she said. Dad says every generation keeps a place at the dock so the next one can find their way back. Delaney crouched down so their eyes were level. Thank you for telling me, she said. Wren nodded once and closed the door behind her. On the drive back over the bridge, Delaney wrote a single line in her notebook. He is letting me choose. The next morning, the FBI liaison sent a fresh package to her office. Targeted parcels, the phrase used by 3 East Coast developers in 3 months of email correspondence with Trumbull's chief of staff. Coordinates, valuations, projected acquisition timelines. 4 addresses along the Cooper River corridor. The third address on the list was 214 Shem Creek Landing, Marston & Sons Marine. She closed the office door. She read the memo twice. Then she called Lena. I need every point of contact between Senator Trumbull's office and anyone named Marston, going back 5 years. Not just Everett. The whole family. The whole parcel. Lena came back an hour later with a single sheet. A draft memo from the Port Authority Commission, dated April of 2023, proposing consolidation of legacy dockside parcels for redevelopment consideration. Never voted on. Never released. Author, Trumbull's chief of staff, a man named Grady Halpern. Delaney was still holding the sheet when her phone rang. The number was the shop line at Marston & Sons. She let it ring 3 times. She answered on the 4th. This is Delaney. It is Everett. His voice sounded the same as it had in the workshop. I got a certified letter from the Port Authority this morning. Public hearing on reclassification of the Shem Creek landing parcel, 3 weeks from Friday. The language is what you would write if you were 3 moves away from taking somebody's land, she said. I know that language. I am not calling to ask you to do anything, he said. I am calling because your case and my problem are the same problem now, and I did not want you to find out from a filing. There was a pause on the line. She said the thing she was supposed to say. Do you have counsel? Yes, meh. He said it the way another man might have said, yes, I have breakfast. No arrogance, no self-deprecation, just the fact. After she hung up, she sat looking at the receiver for a full minute. Then she pulled up Model Rules of Professional Conduct, 1.7. She read it. She read it again. She was not representing him. She could not represent him. The 2 proceedings, United States v. Trumbull and the Marston parcel reclassification, ran on separate tracks, procedurally, but Trumbull was the pressure point behind both. She drafted a memo to the ethics officer of the U.S. Attorney's Office, self-reporting a personal dinner on March 12th with one Everett Marston. Subject property later identified as a targeted parcel in an active federal corruption investigation. She requested a conflicts review. She signed it. She sent it before she could talk herself out of the timing. She did not go home that night. She had takeout brought up from the deli on the corner, and she opened Marston on Admiralty on her tablet. Chapter 7. Long-standing dockside rights and the doctrine against private benefit exercise of eminent domain. She had never read this chapter. She had cited the book only for its treatment of Admiralty jurisdiction under Article 3. She began at the top of the chapter. At 2:14 in the morning she stopped, marked the page with her thumb, and stared at the ceiling of her office. He had, in a sense, written her the answer years ago. He had done it without knowing he was writing it for her. She closed the tablet and slept on the couch. The ethics officer's response arrived on Friday. 2 paragraphs. Not a direct conflict. The Trumbull matter and the marina reclassification were separate proceedings under separate statutory authority. However, given the appearance concerns, she was directed to maintain no private contact with Miss Marston until the Trumbull matter concluded. Official contact, in the ordinary course, was permitted. She read the response twice and put it in the drawer. She sent 1 text message from her personal phone to the shop number. I have to hold a line, but I am here. He replied 40 minutes later. I know. Thank you. That was all. 2 days later, a letter arrived at her office by regular mail, addressed in a child's careful hand. Wren Marston did not know what was happening between the adults. She had written on lined paper, in blue ink, that her father was rebuilding an old sailboat and had named it Halden, and that if Miss Delaney wanted to see it when it was finished, she was welcome to come. She had not asked. She had not urged. She had only offered. Delaney kept the letter in the top drawer of her desk under a paperweight her father had given her a long time ago. The 3 weeks that followed, she lived in 2 rooms. In one room she prepared the grand jury for Trumbull. In the other, at night, alone, With the shades drawn and the desk lamp on, she reread Marston on Admiralty. She was looking for one specific thing. She found it on a Tuesday. A Fifth Circuit decision from 1978, Delacroix versus Parish of Terrebonne. Everett had cited it once in a footnote in Chapter 7. In the neat, unremarkable way a man cites a case he already knows he will never need to argue. The case protected a historic working marina against a taking that had been dressed up as public purpose but was, on the record, meant to benefit a private developer. The precedent was solid. It was also obscure. It had been argued 48 years earlier by a Louisiana lawyer who was long dead. She did not send it to Everett. She could not. Instead, she called an old classmate at Historic Charleston Foundation. A nonprofit she knew had already filed an amicus in a similar case 2 years back. She asked casually whether Historic Charleston would consider filing an amicus in the upcoming Port Authority hearing on the Shem Creek parcel. If they did, she said, they might want to look at Delacroix. She left it there. Historic Charleston filed a brief 8 days later. Delacroix was cited in the second paragraph. 3 days after that, Everett's response to the Port Authority filed under his own name, and no others cited the same case. He did not mention Delaney. He did not need to. She read his filing in the ordinary course, as any U.S. Attorney's office would read a matter of local public record. She marked one paragraph with her thumb and closed the folder. That night, driving home, she took the Ravenel Bridge again. She glanced east as she crossed. The workshop light was on. From this distance it was only a dot of yellow on the dark water. She did not stop. She wondered, for the first time since the blind date, whether he was waiting for her too. Bennett Craig kept a small office on the second floor of a townhouse on Broad Street. 2 rooms, 1 window. A framed print of the USS Constitution over the desk. He was 74 and moved as if he had made peace with his own knees a while back. He called Delaney on a Friday morning. "There is something you should see," he said. "It has nothing to do with Trumbull. It has everything to do with you." She came at 4:30. He did not stand. He gestured to the chair across the desk and pushed 2 folders toward her. "Read the top one first," he said. The top folder held the incorporation papers of the Halden Marston Foundation. Established May of 2022, 1 year and 1 month after the death of Halden Ann Marston. Founder listed as anonymous. Represented in perpetuity by a trust for which Rear Admiral Bennett Craig, USN Ret, served as sole trustee. Purpose: full tuition scholarships in law and public service for the children of enlisted veterans and for orphaned young people from Atlantic coast communities from Wilmington to Savannah. Initial endowment, $9 million. Current balance, 12.4. Delaney set the folder down. "Now the second one," Bennett said. The second folder held her own scholarship record from Georgetown. Meridian Public Interest Fellowship, awarded September 2015. Full tuition, 3 years, $187,000, plus a monthly stipend. Sponsoring organization, Meridian Trust of the Carolinas. She had used that fellowship to finish law school without debt. She had used the freedom from debt to take her first job in the public integrity section of the Department of Justice at half the salary she could have earned in private practice. She had built a career on it. Bennett turned to the last page in the file. Meridian Trust of the Carolinas dissolved and merged into the Halden Marston Foundation. May of 2022. Original funding source of Meridian, established 2013. A single anonymous gift, wired through a Delaware LLC, from an individual identified in the trust's internal records only by initials, E.M. The mailing address of record for the E.M. gift was a post office box in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., that had been maintained during the years Everett Marston lived and worked in the capital. Delaney read the page 3 times. The first time she read it as a lawyer. The second time she read it as the 24-year-old who had opened a scholarship letter on the porch of her mother's house in Beaufort in the summer of 2015 and cried without knowing why. The third time she read it as the woman who had sat across a candle from a man on East Bay Street and told him he probably regretted coming. She looked up. "Did he know who I was?" she said. Bennett shook his head slowly. He funded 23 fellowships that year. He was given the list of names after the awards were made. He did not ask for the list. He never looked at it. He told me at the time, I remember the exact phrasing, he said, "I do not want to know." If I know, I will want to help them again. And that is not the point. She closed the folder. He does not know now, Bennett said. The addendum on his separation from service prohibits me from telling him. I can put paper on a desk. I cannot put a name in his ear. She stood up. She walked to the window. Broad Street was going amber in the late light. A carriage horse clopped past below. I am not going to tell him yet, she said. Bennett nodded. But I am going to make sure he wins his hearing. She walked out of the office and down to the Battery, and sat on a bench facing the harbor for a long time. Tuesday of the 6th week after the blind date, the sky over Charleston was the pale, hard blue of a coin. At 10:47 in the morning, on the steps of the J. Wade's Waring Judicial Center, Delaney Whitcomb read a 2-minute statement to the assembled press. The grand jury had returned a 7-count indictment against State Senator Harlan Trumbull and 4 co-defendants: wire fraud, honest services fraud, bribery, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, 2 counts of witness tampering. She spoke without notes. She did not raise her voice. No one in this state is bigger than the law, she said. Not the man who sits on the Port Commission. Not any of us. She stopped, thanked the press, and walked back inside. The clip ran on the 6 o'clock news that night. She did not watch it. At 12:15 the same afternoon, Trumbull was taken into custody at his home in Columbia by 2 federal marshals. His attorney, a man in an expensive suit, was already there. There were no cameras. At 2 o'clock, 40 miles east, in the modest chambers of the Mount Pleasant Town Hall, the Port Authority Commission convened its long-scheduled hearing on the reclassification of the Shem Creek Landing parcel. Delaney did not attend. She could not. Everett spoke for himself. He wore a shirt with a collar and a jacket that was 5 years old. He did not introduce himself as anything other than the owner of Marston and Sons Marine. He did not use the word author. He did not use the word captain. He told the commissioners about his great-grandfather, who had rebuilt the seawall at the head of the creek after the storm of 1938 and had operated the boatyard through 3 wars. He walked them through 4 points of law, with the plain economy of a man who had known this material for 30 years. He cited Delacroix versus Parish of Terrebonne. He cited 2 South Carolina statutes protecting historic working waterfronts. He did not raise his voice either. In the back row, Bennett Craig sat in a folding chair. Beside him, Wren Marston read her book with her feet not quite touching the floor. She did not understand every word. She understood that something important was being said and that her father was the one saying it. Word of the Trumbull arrest reached the commission chamber at 2:34. A commissioner in the back row checked her phone and passed a note forward. 2 of the 3 commissioners who had been leaning yes on reclassification found reason, in the following half hour, to raise concerns about legal exposure. The chair called for the vote at 4:10, 6-1 against reclassification. Marston and Sons Marine would stand. Everett said thank you to the room. He did not say anything else. Outside the chamber, 3 reporters waited. He told them, I am grateful to my neighbors. I have a little girl who is expecting me home for dinner. That is all I have got tonight. In the parking lot, Bennett walked with him to the truck. Wren was already in the passenger seat, book on her lap. Delaney came to see me last week, Bennett said quietly. About Meridian. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. Everett looked at his daughter through the windshield for a long moment. He did not ask what Bennett had shown her. He did not ask what she had said. That night, at 7:18, Delaney's phone rang at home. The number on the screen was the shop line at Marston and Sons. She let it ring twice. She answered on the 3rd. I have been offered defense work on one of Trumbull's co-defendants, he said. I am going to turn it down. But I wanted you to know I was offered, and I want you to know it is not a road I am taking. He paused. Tomorrow night, he said, if you are free, Wren is baking an apple pie. She would like you to come. It is not me asking. 6:30 the next evening she pulled into the gravel lot at Shem Creek. She had not brought a folder. She had not brought a briefcase. She had brought a bottle of unremarkable red wine and a paper bag of vanilla ice cream from the market on King Street. Wren opened the door with flour on both hands. The kitchen was in the back of the workshop, a narrow room with a farmhouse sink and 2 windows onto the creek. The table sat 3. The pie was already out of the oven. On a rack, the top crust a shade of gold Delaney associated with childhood, without being able to name whose. The conversation was mostly Wren's. She told Delaney about the sailboat. She told her about her math teacher, who wore mismatched socks on purpose to see who noticed. She told her about the nautical charts her mother had left in a wooden box under the bed, and how she was learning to read the shorthand for depth soundings. Delaney listened. She did not turn any of it into a question the way she would have at work. Everett moved through the kitchen without hurry. He served. He cleared. He refilled the water glasses. He did not say much. He did not need to. After the pie, Wren fell asleep on the small sofa in the corner of the kitchen. She had lasted 40 minutes into a conversation about the stars over the marsh. Everett laid a blanket over her without ceremony. He looked at Delaney. He tilted his head toward the back door. They sat outside on 2 wooden chairs at the head of the dock. The workshop lamp was on inside, low, the color of old brass. The moon was 2 nights past full. Down the creek, the ropes of the tied-up boats moved against their pilings with the same small sound she had heard through the restaurant window 6 weeks ago. She said it plainly. "I know about Meridian." He looked out at the water for a while. "I did not know who you were," he said. "You did your own work. You made your own record. I opened 1 door in a hallway of 23 doors that year, and I closed my eyes while I did it," she said. "Did Halden know?" He said, "Halden made me do it." She said, "The people you never meet are the people who matter most." That was her line, not mine. They were quiet for a long time. "I did not come tonight to settle a debt," Delaney said. "I know," Everett said. Neither of them reached for the other. Neither of them moved closer. She sat with her hands folded around a coffee mug he had put in her hand at some point, without saying so. He sat with one boot flat on the deck and the other tilted onto its heel, a single osprey called somewhere down the marsh. The rope struck the piling again. She thought about the candle at Magnolia's. She thought about the way his hand had rested on the table then, and the way his hand rested on his knee now. Nothing dramatic had changed in the man. Something had changed in what she saw. She did not stay late. She stopped to look at Wren asleep on the sofa on her way out. She said goodnight to Everett at the door. He said goodnight back. She drove home with the window down. 3 weeks later, Trumbull's lawyers signaled a plea. 14 years, federal, no cooperation credit needed. The office had built the case tight enough that he did not have anything worth trading. Delaney closed most of the file. She wrote the closing memos herself, longer than they needed to be, because she wanted the record to say what she wanted it to say. An invitation came from Maine Justice in Washington. A courtesy call from the Deputy Attorney General's office. Would she consider a 2-month interview cycle for the Assistant Attorney General role heading the Public Integrity section? It was, in the informal shorthand of that world, an offer disguised as a question. She did not answer for 4 days. On the Saturday afternoon of the 4th day, she drove out to Shem Creek without calling. Everett was on the aft deck of the sailboat, sanding a strip of teak along the stern rail. Wren was on the stone steps at the head of the dock, cross-legged, reading a paperback with a broken spine. The sun was going down over the marsh in the color of unrefined honey. Delaney stood by her car for 3 minutes before Everett looked up. He did not act surprised. She walked to the boat. She told him about the offer. She did not embellish. He listened all the way through. "What do you think?" she said. He set the sandpaper on the rail. "I do not get to decide for you," he said. "But if you go, you should know something. Wren and I are not going anywhere. This dock held a generation before me. It will hold this one," she said. "Can you wait?" He looked at her. "I am not waiting," he said. "I am living. If you want to stop by, you stop by. If you do not, you do not. I am not keeping score." She stood in the low sun. She thought about the promise he had made to a woman 3 years dead. She thought about her own promise to a 24-year-old on a porch in Beaufort who had opened a letter and cried. She thought about the girl on the steps who was pretending not to be listening. She said, "I am not taking DC." She did not elaborate. She did not promise anything else. He nodded once. Then he raised his voice to the steps. "Wren, can Miss Delaney stay for dinner?" "Yes," Wren called back. "If she cuts the apples." Delaney walked past him toward the workshop. She let her shoulder brush his arm as she went by. It was not deliberate, and it was not accidental. Inside the kitchen, she washed her hands at the farmhouse sink. Wren came in from the dock a moment later with 3 apples in the front of her t-shirt. She dumped them onto the cutting board and handed Delaney a knife. Outside the window, Everett went back to the teak rail. The sanding was slow and even. His shoulders sat lower than they had in 3 years. He was aware of that. He did not correct it. 4 months later, at the beginning of the Charleston fall, the light over Shem Creek turned the color of old brass in the mid-afternoon. The wind off the water carried the mild salt of a good tide. Delaney was still the United States Attorney for the District of South Carolina. Her letter declining the Washington position had been 3 sentences long. She had not shown it to anyone. She had not needed to. Wren was 10. On Saturdays she was learning to sail. The boat, finished now, sat at the end of the dock with fresh varnish on the rail and a new white cover on the mainsail. Along the hull, carved into the teak and rubbed with linseed oil, 3 words: Halden kept. Saturday morning. Delaney sat on the top step of the workshop with a coffee mug she had brought in her own car and had, over the last several months, come to keep on a shelf inside. Wren was down at the dock with her father, in the girl's hands, a length of manila line. Everett was showing her, again, how to tie a bowline. Right-hand rabbit up out of the hole, around the tree, back down the hole. He had learned it from his great-grandfather, who had learned it from his father. Bennett Craig's truck pulled into the gravel lot at a little after 11. He walked up the path with a wooden box under his arm. "For your shelf?" he said to Everett. He set the box on the workshop table. Inside the box, the newest printing of Marston on Admiralty. 3rd edition, 2nd reissue, with a plain navy cover. Everett had made only 2 changes to the text this time. Neither one mattered. The change that mattered was on the dedication page. "For H, who told me to come back. For W, who kept me here. For D, who found the door." Delaney read the line once. She did not cry. She set the book back down on the table, closed, and walked out to the dock. She took the line out of Wren's hand and looped it around the piling in the way Everett had taught the girl, the way his great-grandfather had taught him. Everett watched her without saying anything. Wren watched her without saying anything. The 3 of them stood at the head of the dock. The rope struck the piling once, gently, and settled. No one said the thing. Down the creek, somewhere out past the bend, an osprey lifted off a marker post and started the long, slow beat back toward the marsh. A shrimp trawler moved through the middle channel toward the sound. Above them, high above the workshop roof, a few gulls turned into the light. Bennett got back in his truck and drove away without saying goodbye. He had already said what he came to say. Delaney sat down on the edge of the dock with her feet just above the water. Wren sat down beside her. After a moment, Everett sat down on the other side of the girl. Neither of them had been looking, but the place at the dock was still there, and the ones who needed to come back had found their way.